Think for a moment about the quietest person you know. Not the most mysterious, not the most troubled, just the quietest. The one who shows up to gatherings, smiles genuinely, contributes to the conversation, and then goes home alone and seems perfectly okay with that. Maybe even happy, maybe even relieved. You might have wondered about them. You might have felt a flicker of concern. Don't they get lonely? Don't they wish they had someone to call at the end of a hard day? Don't they wonder what they're missing? And then if you looked a little closer, you realize something surprising. They're not suffering. They're not hiding pain behind a composed face. They're not secretly counting down the days until someone finally chooses them. They're just at peace. And that peace, quiet, self-contained, unannounced, is exactly what we're going to explore today. Because in a world that has made friendship into a moral requirement, in a culture that ties social connection to mental health, worth, and even lifespan, there are people walking among us who don't have a close circle, and they are genuinely, deeply, authentically okay. Not performing okayness, not convincing themselves. Actually okay. This is not a video about loneliness as a problem to solve. This is not a warning or a lecture. This is an honest, psychologically grounded exploration of what it means to live a fulfilled life outside the social scripts we were all handed at birth. And by the end, I think you'll see whether this describes you, or someone you love, that there is nothing broken here. There is, in fact, something quietly extraordinary. Let's begin. There's a question I want to start with, and I want you to sit with it rather than answer it too quickly. When did you first learn that friendship was mandatory? Because you did learn it. We all did, probably around age 5 or 6, when being chosen on the playground felt like a verdict on your worth as a human being. When having a best friend was social proof that you mattered. When children who played alone were gently, worriedly pulled toward groups by well-meaning adults who believed and had been taught that isolation equals suffering. This idea followed us through school, through adolescence, through early adulthood. It's baked into every romantic comedy where the lead character's best friend is treated as the emotional cornerstone of their life. It's in every self-help book that lists strong social bonds as the #1 predictor of happiness. It's in every study that gets quoted in headlines. Loneliness is as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And yes, all of that is real. The research is not wrong. Social connection is, for the majority of human beings, genuinely vital. But here is what those studies cannot measure, and almost never acknowledge. Not all solitude is loneliness. Not all independence is disconnection. Not all quiet lives are empty ones. The research on loneliness measures the subjective experience of unwanted isolation, the gap between the connection you crave and the connection you have. But there is a category of human experience that those instruments simply aren't designed to capture. The person who genuinely, truly does not crave the depth of social bond that most people require, and who, because of that, does not experience its absence as a wound. These are people who have found their fullness inside themselves. And understanding how that happens, and whether it's healthy, sustainable, and real, is one of the most fascinating questions in contemporary psychology. Let's talk about what the psychology actually tells us. For decades, researchers largely assumed that human beings had a universal, hardwired need for close social bonds. And in a broad sense, that's true. We are a social species. Our nervous systems evolved in community. Our threat detection systems are calibrated to social cues. Rejection at a neurological level activates some of the same pain circuits as physical injury. But here's where it gets nuanced. The intensity of that need, the threshold at which a person feels socially fulfilled, varies enormously between individuals. Psychologists call this social baseline theory, the idea that each person has a kind of set point for how much social contact they need to feel regulated, safe, and complete. For some people, that set point is very high. They need frequent, close, emotionally intimate contact with others to feel okay. For others, the set point is genuinely lower. They can go longer between meaningful interactions. They don't experience the growing discomfort, the itch, the ache that more socially dependent personalities experience during solitude. This is not a dysfunction. It is a trait variation. Just as some people need more physical movement to feel regulated and others need more stillness, people differ in how much social contact their nervous system requires to feel at home. And crucially, the people at the lower end of that spectrum are not emotionally numb. They are not attachment avoidant in the clinical sense. They are not simply in denial about a need they've suppressed. In many cases, they are fully emotionally alive. They just experience that aliveness primarily within themselves rather than through others. Psychologists sometimes describe this as being what's called a self-contained personality. That phrase is worth sitting with. Self-contained, not closed, not cold, not fortress-like, just complete within its own walls. Now, there's a question I want to address directly because if we're being honest, it comes up. It came up for me when I first explored this material. Is it possible that people who say they're fine without close friends are just not aware of what they're missing? Could they be rationalizing loneliness into contentment? It's a fair question. And the honest answer is sometimes yes, that does happen. There are people who have constructed elaborate philosophical frameworks around their solitude to avoid confronting the grief underneath it. We'll come back to that. But the assumption that everyone who says they're okay must secretly be suffering is its own kind of bias. It assumes that deep friendship is so universally essential that no one could genuinely not need it, which is precisely the cultural script we're trying to examine here. What the research actually shows is more interesting. When psychologists study individuals who score low on measures of loneliness despite having sparse social networks, they find that these individuals often have a strong sense of isolation, despite having few friends and a sparse social network. They consistently find certain shared psychological features. These are not features of numbness or avoidance. They are features of what we might call integrated selfhood. First, high levels of self-awareness. These individuals tend to know themselves unusually well. They understand their own emotional states, their needs, their triggers, their values. They have a well-developed inner narrative, a sense of their own story that doesn't depend on being witnessed by others to feel real. Second, what researchers call interoceptive richness, a strong connection to one's own inner sensations, emotions, and bodily experience. These individuals are not emotionally absent. They feel deeply, but the primary audience of that feeling is themselves, not other people. Third, a capacity for what psychologists call mentalization, the ability to hold complex inner states, to sit with ambiguity and uncertainty without needing to externalize them through conversation. Where many people process emotion through talking, these individuals process through reflection, creativity, or simply being still. These are not pathologies. These are, in many traditions, philosophical, spiritual, literary, considered marks of genuine psychological maturity. Let's talk about how this develops. Because people don't simply arrive in adulthood self-sufficient by accident. There are usually pathways, some chosen, some circumstantial, some carved out of pain. The first pathway is temperament. Some people are born more internally oriented than others. From the earliest years of life, they are more interested in the inner world than the outer one. They observe rather than participate. They prefer depth to breadth. They find large groups overstimulating and small quiet moments genuinely satisfying. Introversion is part of this story, but it doesn't fully explain it. There are highly introverted people who still desperately need close, intimate friendship. They just want it one-on-one rather than in groups. The quality we're describing goes a layer deeper. It's not just a preference for quiet environments. It's a genuine comfort with emotional self-reliance. Children with this temperament often thrive in solitary activities, reading, drawing, building, writing, exploring nature. Not because they're antisocial, but because their inner world is so richly populated that they don't experience it as empty. Solitude for them is not an absence. It is a presence of their own thoughts, imagination, and curiosity. If that temperament is supported rather than pathologized in childhood, it becomes the foundation of something genuinely powerful in adulthood. The second pathway is circumstance. Many people who are at peace without close friendships did not start out that way. They moved frequently as children to different cities, different schools, different countries, and learned early that the bonds they formed were temporary. They adapted. They developed internal resources because external ones were unreliable, or they were part of families where emotional intimacy happened within the family unit more than outside it, where parents, siblings, and extended family provided the relational nourishment that many people seek in friendships. These individuals may not form close friendships not because they can't connect, but because their relational world is already full, just organized differently. Or they were early outliers in some way, intellectually, creatively, spiritually, and found that the people around them simply didn't share the depth of interests or the kind of conversation they were hungry for. So they found that depth in books, in art, in ideas. In solitude, they found the companionship that their social environment couldn't offer. The third pathway is harder to speak about, but it's important. Some people have been hurt, deeply hurt by friendships that collapsed, by betrayals from people they trusted, by patterns of chronic misunderstanding in close relationships. And after enough of that pain, they made a quiet decision, not always conscious, not always permanent, to stop investing in a direction that kept returning them to grief. This is a more complicated case, and I want to handle it carefully. Because there is a version of this that is genuinely wisdom, recognizing that you've been choosing the wrong kinds of people, or that you've been seeking closeness as a means of filling an inner emptiness, and learning to build that foundation differently, to stop outsourcing your self-worth to relationships. And there is a version that is, beneath its composed surface, a wound pretending to be a philosophy. The difference, and this is crucial, is whether your solitude feels open or closed, whether it comes from having found peace or from having given up on safety, whether you feel genuinely free in your own company or quietly defended. We'll return to this distinction. It matters more than almost anything else in this conversation. I want to spend a few minutes on something that rarely gets acknowledged in conversations about friendship and mental health: the enormous energetic cost that social intimacy carries for some people. Not everyone, but some people, particularly those with high empathy, or what psychologists call sensory processing sensitivity, experience close relationships as genuinely, physically demanding. We're not talking about social anxiety, though that can overlap. We're talking about something more fundamental: the experience of absorbing other people's emotional states involuntarily, of carrying other people's pain, worry, and need as if it were their own, of needing long periods of solitude not as a preference but as a biological necessity, the way sleep is a necessity, the way food is a necessity. For these individuals, friendship isn't simple. It's a complex negotiation between genuine love for another person and the genuine cost that closeness carries. They can love deeply and maintain closeness with only one or two people because that is, quite literally, the full capacity of what their nervous system can sustain. They are often the most thoughtful, perceptive, and caring people in any room. But they have learned, sometimes through exhaustion, sometimes through collapse, that they cannot be close to many people, not because they're cold, because they feel too much. If this is your experience, I want you to hear something clearly. There is nothing wrong with you. The capacity you have to feel other people's inner lives so acutely is genuinely rare. It is also genuinely expensive. Protecting your energy is not selfishness. It is the basic prerequisite for being able to offer anything to the world at all. Let's talk about what connection looks like when it doesn't follow the standard script. Because one of the most profound misconceptions about people who live without close friendships is that they are therefore disconnected from the world, emotionally sealed, going through life on a flat, effectless surface. The reality is often the opposite. Many of these individuals experience connection, deep, nourishing, sometimes overwhelming connection through channels that mainstream culture doesn't fully legitimize as real relationships. Creative work. The writer who has poured every truth they know about longing, grief, wonder, and love into sentences. The musician who plays an instrument alone at midnight and feels, in that moment, profoundly accompanied. The painter who looks at a finished canvas and experiences what can only be described as meeting someone through nature. There is a body of research in environmental psychology that documents something most naturalists have known intuitively for centuries. Sustained, attentive engagement with the natural world produces genuine experiences of connection, of belonging, of being part of something larger, of not being alone. For some people, these experiences are not a consolation prize for the absence of human closeness. They are the real thing. Through ideas. There are people who find their deepest companionship in books, not as escapism but as genuine encounter. Reading a writer who articulates something you've felt for decades but never had the language for is an experience of intimacy. It is being known. It just happens across time, through text, with someone you'll never meet, through spiritual practice, through service, through work that carries genuine meaning, through the particular irreplaceable bond between a person and an animal who loves them completely and without agenda. These are not substitutes for human closeness. For the people who live inside them, they are primary. They are the fabric of a life that is, quietly, richly, fully inhabited. I want to spend a moment on the concept of emotional independence, because it's often misunderstood, treated as either a badge of honor or a red flag, when it's actually something far more subtle. Emotional independence, at its healthiest, is not the absence of need. It is the ability to meet your own needs without requiring another person to do it for you. It's the difference between choosing solitude and being stuck in it, between enjoying your own company and having no other option. At its healthiest, emotional independence produces a very specific quality in relationships. When they do happen, they are chosen from fullness rather than entered from hunger. This changes everything about how those relationships feel. There's no grasping, no testing, no cycles of pursuit and withdrawal that exhaust both parties. When a person who is genuinely emotionally self-sufficient allows someone into their inner world, they are creating a safe space for the other person to explore their own thoughts, feelings, and experiences. It's a gift freely offered, not a trade, not a rescue operation, not a dependency dressed as love. The paradox is that people with high emotional independence often make the most grounded, least demanding partners and friends precisely because they don't need the relationship to complete them. They bring something whole to the table, not a collection of needs waiting to be filled. That said, and this is where the caution lives, emotional independence can also become a shield, a sophisticated, philosophically defended reason for never being vulnerable again. And the trouble with sophisticated defenses is that they're hard to see through, from the inside. If your emotional independence was built slowly, through genuine self-knowledge, through learning to meet yourself with compassion, it will feel open, spacious, warm. You'll be at peace. And that peace will be inclusive. You'll be glad when good people show up, even if you don't need them to. But if it was constructed quickly, after pain, as a fortress, it will feel different. It will feel defended. There will be a slight edge of "I don't need anyone" that is really "I cannot bear to need anyone again." And beneath that edge, if you're honest, you'll find grief. Both are human. Both deserve compassion. But only one is truly free. Let's talk about something that I think is genuinely beautiful and genuinely rare. The people we've been describing, the self-contained, the emotionally independent, the quietly content, have often done something that most people spend entire lifetimes trying to do, through therapy, through meditation, through crisis. They have made peace with themselves. Real peace. Not the performance of it, not the suppression of discomfort, not the philosophical argument that you don't need what you've never had. Actual, grounded peace with being exactly who they are, in their own company, without needing the mirror of another person's gaze to feel real. That is not nothing. That is, in many traditions, considered the deepest form of freedom available to a human being. The Stoics called it autarkia, self-sufficiency, not self-isolation, but the quality of being inwardly complete, not immune to the world, but not dependent on it for your fundamental sense of okayness. Buddhist traditions describe something similar, the capacity to be fully present in your own experience without the compulsive reaching outward for stimulation, validation, or relief. Contemporary psychology describes it as secure self-esteem, a sense of worth that doesn't fluctuate with external feedback, that doesn't require constant reinforcement because it's built on something more durable than approval. People who genuinely, sustainably live well without close friendships have often, whether they've named it or not, developed this. They know who they are. They're not perpetually negotiating their identity through the reactions of others. They have a clear, stable inner compass, and it's enough to navigate by. That's not coldness. That's freedom. I want to address something for anyone listening who lives this way, who recognizes themselves in what we've been describing and feels, perhaps, a quiet mix of recognition and something more complicated. Maybe a small voice that says, "But what if I'm missing something? What if the life I've built, the solitude, the inner richness, the peace, is actually a very elegant way of avoiding something I've never admitted I need?" If that voice is there, I want you to take it seriously. Not with alarm, not with shame, but with genuine curiosity. Because here is the thing. Real peace is curious. It's open. It doesn't need to defend itself. If you're genuinely content, the question, "What am I missing?" lands lightly. You can hold it without anxiety. You can consider it without it threatening the ground you're standing on. But if there's something defensive in how you receive that question, a tightening, a slight bristle, a rush to justify, that's worth paying attention to. Not because it means you're wrong about yourself, but because the places we rush to defend are often the places we most need to look. This isn't an invitation to dismantle your life. It's an invitation to approach yourself with honesty. To ask gently, "Is my solitude a home I've built or a wall I've hidden behind?" And to hold whatever answer comes up with the same compassion you'd offer a very close friend. Let's close with something about beauty. Because I think there is something genuinely beautiful and genuinely important about the kind of life we've been describing. Not better than a life rich with close friendships, not more enlightened, but its own complete thing. In a culture that valorizes constant connection, where the number of relationships you maintain has become a kind of social currency, where "I'm so bad at keeping in touch" is offered as an apology, and "I have so many friends" is offered as a credential, there is something quietly radical about a person who has simply decided that they will not live according to that metric, who has decided that the quality of their inner life matters more to them than its visibility, that a small number of genuine, chosen connections, or none at all, for stretches of time, is more honest and more nourishing than a wide network maintained from obligation, who has learned through attention, through time, through whatever particular path brought them here, that they can be their own witness, their own companion, their own best friend in the truest and most demanding sense of that phrase. That takes something. It takes honesty. It takes the willingness to look at yourself without flinching. It takes the courage to say, this is who I am in a world that constantly tells you who you should be. And if you've done that, if you've genuinely arrived at a place where your own company is enough, where the inner world you inhabit is rich and true and yours, then you've done something that cannot be taken from you. The quiet life is not a lesser life. The person who blooms in silence is not less alive than the one who blooms in crowds. They are just a different kind of flower. If you're watching this and you've been nodding along, if you're the quiet one, the self-sufficient one, the one people worry about unnecessarily, I hope this felt like being seen, not fixed, not explained away, just seen. And if you're watching this because you love someone like this, and you've never quite understood how they could possibly be okay, I hope this gave you a frame. They're not hiding. They're not broken. They're not waiting to be rescued. They're living fully, quietly on their own terms. And that, even when it looks from the outside like nothing very much, can be its own kind of extraordinary life.